All right. Welcome everybody to this Channel Vision Magazine webinar featuring RingLogix. Today, we're going to specifically explore how we can make more money, especially with RingLogix's help. Now, that means being able to scale smarter, boosting growth and monthly recurring revenue for MSPs and resellers alike. Now, I'm your moderator, Brady Hicks, managing editor for Channel Vision. And joining us today, we have the founder and the CEO of RingLogix, his name, Albert Diaz. How you doing today, Albert?
Brady, what's up, buddy? How are you? Good to be here.
Doing good, doing good. I also want to remind everybody that before we jump in, during the webinar, if you do have any questions, you can go to the Q&A tab there at the bottom of the screen, and that will allow you to pose questions for us to give to Albert throughout the presentation. Also, you're going to want to stay tuned because RingLogix is presenting an exclusive offer. You can learn how to earn up to $1,000 in credit, good toward any RingLogix service. Of course, that's all on the back burner there. The most important thing, Albert, obviously, is making money. Tell us about today's agenda. How can we make more money?
So, guys, just like Brady said, I do encourage the questions. Today's webinar is going to be a little different than you're probably used to. A lot of vendors do these webinars and they take, 30, 40, 50 minutes really pitching their products. And that's not what we want to do today, right? Yes, at the end, I'll spend 2 minutes talking about us and how maybe some of this ties into us. But really today, what we wanted to do was just share, right? Been very fortunate to start and grow a few companies. My first two companies was able to take them to 7-figure revenue and kind of learn what that's like. And it wasn't until this company that I was able to, start building a path towards 8-figure revenue and beyond, that I really learned the differences between a small lifestyle business that even if you're in 7-figure revenue, depends a lot on you, and what it's like to grow a scalable business that actually starts creating wealth, for you, your family, your team members, and is able to grow whether or not you're part of the formula or not. So today, we're going to focus a lot on really things about boosting your revenue, boosting your growth. We've got a couple different topics, but they're all related to each other, and even some of the conversation inside of them is going to overlap. We're going to start with talking about expanding your service offerings and what that's like, what you should be looking at, what we've learned, how we analyze products internally when we want to consider them either for ourselves or our partners. We're then going to talk about some effective sales strategies. Now, that is going to be the majority of our conversation today. I think that's where we have the most to share. We're going to talk about a particular sales strategy that really takes the guesswork out of sales and helps you produce pipeline. And then we're going to talk about a couple of techniques that we've learned throughout the way that help you really manage conversations. And then once that's done, we're going to wrap it up with the importance of what it's like to own the customer relationship and the things that you should be considering there. And then operational efficiencies that you need, right? Now you've seen them you've seen them all. You've seen a lot of webinars about integrations and things of that sort, but we're going to talk about really just beyond the integrations is why you need the integrations and where they should exist so you can have a quote to cash type experience.
Now, when it comes to expanding service offerings, what should MSPs and resellers kind of prioritize in order to ensure higher margins and MRRs? And maybe could you share some examples of solutions that work well in today's market?
So it's really, it's even beyond just having good margins, having higher ARPU, right? There's a lot of things that you should be considering when you're bringing in products. Now, the reality is for MSPs and a lot of service providers alike, you need to stay relevant, you need to stay competitive, you need to stay profitable. So you have to constantly be evolving, right? Because if you're standing still, then essentially you're falling behind. So essentially it's, if you don't offer it, stay competitive. If you don't offer it, will your competitors be offering it? Increasing customer retention. The more services you provide, we all know the harder it is to find a replacement. Boosting profitability, when you need to be expanding your offerings, you need to be taking a look at what's out there. What do your customers need? What can you deliver to an audience? And does it have a high ARPU and a high margin? We'll talk about that a bit. You want to see what kind of solutions, really help strengthen your relationships and really, future-proofing your business. We've seen a lot of volatility in the IT business over the last 5-6 years. Different solutions have come and gone like fads. There's certain staples that are there. But what we have learned is that the partners that stay ahead of the trends and are there during the adoption phase are the ones that tend to do very well, right? So it's always be expanding, always be looking for new products. And then we're going to get into here what you should be looking at when you look at those products, right? Because not all products are exactly equal. So for us, when we look at products internally for ourselves to consume or even for us to offer to our partners, there's three big considerations that we have or we look at, which are financial, experience, and market driven. Financial considerations when a partner is looking at a product, right? So before adding anything, you really want to ask yourself, what's the revenue model? And everything else has to come from this perspective. It's my purpose, right? So is this product a gateway product or a loss leader? Is it a money maker, right? Is it something big for me? Is it a necessary evil, which sometimes you got to do, but you got to be careful with those. Once you've identified what kind of product it is, then you're ready to start answering the rest of the questions. So for example, what's the addressable audience that I really have here, right? We're not talking about like total addressable market share or anything of that sort, but from your perspective, what's your addressable audience? And you typically want to narrow it down to two things, right? Is it a niche where you can be seen as a subject matter expert? For example, maybe you're very familiar with some sort of dental software or medical software, auto dealership software. So there's something you can do in that space and that's very specific. Or does it align with your existing customer base, right? Do you have, perhaps it's even a commodity, right? But everyone consumes commodities. So do you have a large base that you could offer this commodity to and they would be able to adopt it? Now you can venture outside of these audiences, but when you look at being effective with your sales, right? Depending where you are in your business, if you're starting it, if you're more mature, you typically want to stay in these realms because that's where you have the least amount of risk, right? Anything outside of that, it starts becoming riskier for you. And then you got to look at the ARPU and the margins, right? So the ARPU is the average revenue per unit. What does this product sell for? And then the profit margins, everybody knows what that is. So does it have anemic or healthy revenue? And other margins strong? Because again, you know, as you're looking at products to offer, there's only so many things you can do. There's only so many products that you can train your team on, that you can actually support internally, that you can get a grasp on. So you got to be choosy about what you do. And if you're bringing in services that are $5 to $10 to $20 a month, right, per user, per customer, and they deliver 20, 30% margins, you're not going to drive any real growth, right? So how can you start looking at services that are maybe in the $30 per user range and have margins in the 70% range? And then all of a sudden, when you look at your average customer in the 7 to 15 seats, and you're adding, you know, $30 times 7 to 15, and you got 70% margins, that's a lot better than if you were adding, you know, a $5 service, even if it had a 50% margin. So these are some of the high level financial considerations. Then we're looking at experience considerations. And to me, this is as important as a profitability side, right? Because if you're consuming too many resources, if you're impacting my operations, if you're hurting sentiment, then, you know, I'm making $1 in one place, losing it somewhere else. And that just doesn't quite work out. So I look at things like control. Do I control the pricing on the product? How smooth is the ordering and installation process? Can you manage the configurations yourself? On the support side, who's the first point of contact for your customer issues? And especially for MSPs, this will come up again. That's a sensitive subject because even when you sell someone else's product, the customer doesn't typically call that person first, right? You're the IT vendor. You're the person that recommended it. You're the person that was involved in the installation. You handle everything that plugs into the internet or plugs into the wall, basically. So you know that they're going to call you first. Well, do you have the right tools to be able to help out? What level of access do you have, right, to be able to help out? And how reliant are you on the vendor for help, right? It kind of sucks when you have a solution that the only way to troubleshoot it or do anything for your customer is to have to get the vendor involved. So does this solution have some level of self-serve or troubleshooting or access so that I can be as self-sufficient as possible so I can move forward? And then what's the branding and ownership like, right? Does it build and reinforce my brand, or is it building and reinforcing somebody else's brand, right? That definitely affects how much I can invest into the product itself and into the growth of the product. Because at the end of the day, you know, I want to own the relationship. So, you know, if I'm building somebody else's brand, I'm not owning the relationship, then that's going to be a big issue for me as well. Then the last thing we have here is the market considerations, right? Understanding the impact that this service has on you in the market. So when you're looking at your competition and different market trends, are your competitors offering this or not? A lot of times you got to follow the bandwagon, right? If the competition across the street has it and that's what the local market wants, then you got to have it, right? Are the providers of this solution encroaching in your space? So you'll see a lot of times you're offering a third-party product, right? And we're just going to call out one of the big names. Somebody gets mad, right? They say I'm a telecom guy, so one of the AT&Ts or Comcasts of the world, right? So you're recommending vendors like this to come in, but then at the end of the day, those same vendors, the AT&Ts and the Comcast, they now have a $99 managed Wi-Fi, or they have a $49 backup, right? Or a $4.99 email. So the customer starts looking at these, what are traditionally IT services offered by the telecom vendor. Perhaps they take the relationship for granted, which is another conversation altogether, and they're moving away, right? So if you really want to be careful that you're not leaving an opportunity on the table for the vendors that you're working with to now start being able to take your customers. And then long-term equity and exit value, what does it do? You got to look at, we talked about ARPU and margins, which is more short-term. That's going to determine how much you can invest in the growth, your ROI, what kind of money is putting in your pocket today. But then long-term, what does it do for your business, right? So even if you have a product that's selling like hotcakes and you say, okay, Albert, this product doesn't have the highest ARPU, doesn't have the highest margin, but everybody's buying it. Okay, that's great. But do you want to exit one day, and what's that going to do for your exit, right? Because if you have this commission that's coming from a third-party company, there's a good chance that commission revenue, when you go sell, it's going to get carved out, right? And whatever multiple you're hoping to get in your business, that commission revenue is probably not going to get the same multiple, right? So we're going to make up numbers here, but let's say you were fortunate to get 3 to 5x on your revenue. They might pull out whatever you have in commissions, $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 for the year, and that may only get a half X or a 1x. Right, it all depends on who the company is and how strong the contracts are. So that's it. That's essentially what we look at when we're looking at expanding products and what we're considering internally.
Now, Albert, I know a lot of companies maybe struggle with the idea of expanding their portfolio without draining resources. Making the right choices, like you said. Any kind of quick tip advice for companies that are struggling to do that?
Yeah, you always want to look at your low-hanging fruit. What is it that you have that you can offer with the least amount of effort and the most amount of return? And you got to ask yourself, do I have a short-term goal because I got to add 5, 10,000 to my MRR overnight, right? And that's what I'm trying to do. It's this operation billing squeeze. Or is this a more long-term goal where I can afford to grow slower over a longer period of time? So once you kind of understand what you're looking for, then you start understanding what kind of product you want to bring in. But I think it's really important. Always start by looking at your customer base first.
Man, that's really good advice for sure. Now I know, in terms of effective sales strategies, many MSPs, they tend to struggle with identifying the right customers to target, and then more importantly, even engaging with them. Could you explain how a targeted ABM approach kind of helps them focus on the ideal customer and strategy and support that process?
So for us, it starts with an ABM approach. And this is something that's kind of like new to me, right? But we really feel like we started to master it lately. So with the first 2 organizations that we grew, and again, I grew those to 7-figure revenue, very fortunate, very healthy business. It was a lot about the brand. It was a lot about me, the owner, right? Having a reputation for doing something well, being part of the project, right? It was your typical lifestyle business, what I think many MSPs can associate to when you got, maybe 5, 10 employees. It wasn't until I started looking at ABM in this organization that I realized there's a method here for predictable growth, right? That doesn't involve the owner's reputation. It doesn't involve pushing your product, right? It allows you to have more predictable pipeline, and it's all about ABM, right? So a lot of times, MSP service providers, et cetera, we suffer through unpredictable lead flow or low inbound quality, right? So you're doing your Google ads, you're doing your Facebook ad, you're paying some social person to do these social posts for you. And you know what? Every once in a while, it produces a magic lead, but most of the time it doesn't. And really what you have is like this black box of activity with this drip of faith on the bottom. And what ABM does is that it kind of systemizes that, right? It turns it into a systemized techie thing like us techie guys like. So what you do is, instead of just doing this big advertising, you're starting to target very specific accounts, right? What you consider to be a high value account. So the same way we're very intentful about the products that we bring into the organization because we've got limited resources, we're very intentful about the way that we go sell it, right? This is all about quality over quantity. So for MSPs in particular, it means that they get the opportunity to really zero in on the businesses that need their expertise, while being able to custom tailor the messaging to those individual roles, and then closing deals faster, right? Because you're just doing better work. So on the next slide, I'll kind of cover what ABM in a nutshell is. We're going to talk about some of the moving parts. Now, again, for technical people, we look at this and we say, all right, this is way too much, but it's really, really not, right? So in an ABM approach, right, what you're doing is you're first identifying accounts. So these are accounts that match your ideal customer profile. And I'm the first one to say I hate personas. I've been personaed to death with all the marketing agencies out there. That's not what this is, right? An ideal customer profile is basically a lookalike list, right? It's a list of companies that match your most successful type of customers, or your most profitable customers, or the ones that buy the best products from you, right? Or ones where you're a subject matter expert in an underserved niche, right? You're essentially identifying accounts and saying, I want those accounts. Because at the end of the day, yes, we sell through people, to people, right? But we sell to accounts. So that's what we're looking at here. So we're delivering or developing a list of accounts based off the customers that we have today. Then we're identifying what are the roles in those accounts, right? Why? Because every person has a different thing that they go through, right? They go through it differently. They have a different perspective. They have a different experience with it. So it's very important to understand who are the people in the organization, how they engage with your solution, how they influence your solution. And you got to think outside the box. It's not always just the owner, the manager, the CEO, the VP level, the director. A lot of times it could be a sales exec or a support manager or an engineer, because they're actually the ones that consume it. So what you're doing is you're identifying the roles, you're identifying how that role engages or influences your product use, and then you're creating messaging that's specific to that role. So a CFO is going to have financial messaging. A tech support manager will have technical messaging. An operations manager will have operational messaging, etc. And that's when we get into the messaging piece, right? So I kind of covered it in the roles, which is in the messaging, you're not just preparing one big blanket email. I'm sure we've all done this. Maybe everybody in this call, right? You buy a list somewhere, 30,000 emails. You just blast out one big email. You get 3 replies. You get 50 replies, whatever, right? That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that you have a message very specific to the role that you're going after. So whether it's an executive or administrator or an assistant or whatever it is, messaging that speaks to that role. Then you got your contact gathering, right? And that's where, okay, you say, okay, I've got these companies I want to go after. I want to go after ABC Pizza across the street. I know that inside of ABC Pizza, it's going to be the floor manager, the counter rep, and the district manager that are people that are going to make decisions. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a place like LinkedIn where I can look up companies. I'm going to look up that pizza shop. I'm going to go to the employees. I'm going to start looking through the employees, and I'm going to identify who are the people that I would want to talk to or influence inside this company to help me close this company, right? And you're using a tool like Surf or Upsell. There's a few out there. And what these tools do is that they allow you to find the contact, select the contact, right? And now it's going to automatically enrich that contact with its contact data, drop it into your CRM, and then your CRM can kick off the beginning of your orchestrated outreach. Right. And that's the next piece that we have down here. So the orchestrated outreach, it's because you can't just pick a person and say, I'm going to call them 15 times and go after it. No, that doesn't work. Right. I'm sure we've all heard the story of the father bull and the younger bull that were walking at the top. And, the baby bull said, let's run down there and grab the cows. And the father bull was like, no, son, we're going to walk down there and cherry pick them one by one. Right. So the idea here is you got to do the same thing. You can't just attack all your people with one big message or just hit them up on the phone. You're not going to get anywhere. So you want a very specific, high-touch, multi-channel outreach, something that's got 15 plus touches inside of it. You want to use a combination of email, text, social interactions are big, right? Studies show that when you give to someone, they feel the necessity to reciprocate. So liking someone's social post, commenting on their social post, agreeing with them in public, these are all soft interactions that put you in front of that person. If you're lucky enough to be able to run targeted ads, right? You can run targeted ads on Meta in different places, start showing your logo to these people. Again, not with the intention to convert, but to increase your frequency. And then once you've sent a few emails, done a few socials, sent a few targeted display ads, now you've built up the frequency, you start making the phone call. And that kind of warm up before the actual phone call is what's going to increase your success rate on the call in itself. So what we did here is we just talked about some of the bigger moving parts. Of course, there's a lot more to it. But as you can tell, it's really not complicated. It's just systemized sales. You don't have to be a sales wizard to do this stuff. Now, what I got next is, why ABM works, right? Before we get to the next slide. So again, you're laser focused on the right buyers. You're not going after random companies. You're not going after random people. You're going after specific companies and specific people with specific conversation. Because you're doing that so intensely, you're having meaningful conversations, right? You're not just sending a random message to someone that really has no reason to be reading that messaging. You're going to have a substantially higher win rate. Again, you're not shooting at 1,000 to land 1. You're shooting at 100 to land 10, right? You're shooting at 50 to land 20 possibly. So it's a much more predictable win rate. And then you got efficiency over volume, right? The days of volume are over. This is not about cycling through 100,000 contacts. Again, this is about calling 15 people or identifying 15 companies. And then maybe if you're fortunate, being able to close 10, 20 of those 50 companies, right? If you're very strategic. Now, what I'm going to share next, I got a couple things to share. These are like some, tips, tricks that we picked up throughout the years. One is, running discoveries. So, when you're doing this ABM process, when you finally get them on the phone, when you finally have conversation, it's time to have a discovery, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people miss in the sale. They get eager, they instantly want to start pitching, they start talking about their products, their services, the award they got last year, the person that recommended them, a chamber of commerce, whatever. Nobody cares about any of that, right? Nobody cares about you, nobody cares about your stuff. I mean, that's just not what people care about, right? So essentially what you want to do is you want to learn how to have a discovery. You want to learn how to have a conversation. You want to start learning if you should be qualifying this person. And then even in that qualification process, start creating some interest, right? So what we've learned is that most high ticket sales reps, this is where they lose. And it's usually, like I said before, they focus too much on pain, they focus too much on features, or they focus too much on closing too soon. And there is a pretty generic 4-step framework, right? That if you run your discovery like this, and of course you adjust it to yourself, you'll notice that you're going to start having more meaningful conversations and it'll go a little bit better. So we'll have an example here. This is very generic, right? You got to adjust them. But the first thing you're going to do is as you're talking to the person, you want to identify the pain. So you'll ask something like, what are the biggest hurdles you're facing in your current process, right? Now, when they give you that answer, you might instantly want to be like, well, this is how I fix it. No, you got to slow it down, right? So now ask an impact question. Okay, well, how have these challenges impacted your team or your operations or your customers or your bottom line, right? Always relevant to what you're talking about. And they're going to give you that answer. Now you're going to ask an ideal scenario question, right? So if you could change anything about that situation, what would it look like? What's your ideal scenario look like? And now they're building this world. So now this person, again, instead of you coming and attacking them with a bunch of stuff, they're building this scenario. They're really explaining to you, they're opening up. And then you finish it off with the killer question. And this one is made to convert. Well, what would happen if these challenges were met this year or in the next 3 to 6 months or ever? What kind of consequence do you have there? Why? Because people are more likely to move on consequence than they are to move on reward, right? It's very strange. And some people on this call may disagree, and I tend to disagree. I love reward, but a big part of the population doesn't. So you want to start looking at the consequences of inaction versus the benefit of action and kind of start focusing on that. That's also going to help you qualify your customer. Again, guys, this is all about making sure you're doing the right thing for you and for the other person. You don't want to waste your time if this person is not really a legitimate qualified buyer, and you don't want to waste their time either, right? You don't want to have a reputation as a cold caller. You don't want to have a reputation of people who are baiting and switching. You want to have legitimate conversations, see if you can help somebody, and if you can, move forward, and if you can't, learn how to walk away. The next two things I'm going to share are two techniques that we picked up. One that we kind of just learned about, and then one that I just did naturally, right, and kind of give it a name. So the first one here is the hot potato technique, right? And again, this is just really good about for managing conversations, right? What we've learned is some of the best sales reps master this, and it kind of ties into what I said before, which is not being defensive during a call, right? And right away, some people will be like, I'm not defensive. That's defensive right there, right? Being defensive is anything that's perceived defensive. It doesn't matter what you thought you said. It doesn't matter what you meant to say. It only matters what the other person perceives. And their perception is going to be based off their experiences, their knowledge, right or wrong, etc. So you never want to jump to an objection. Instead, you want to try to flip it, right, and get more information instead, right? So what do most sales reps do, right? A customer might ask you something like, well, why are you guys better? Why should I go with you? And the sales rep will instantly fire back, we're better because of X, Y, Z, right? Or why are you better than this other company? We're better than X, Y, Z. Again, it's defensive, it's salesy, it's pushy. And even if you're saying the truth, you're bragging. Nobody likes braggers. Nobody cares, right? So instead with the hot potato technique, what you're trying to do is you're trying to flip it. And instead of giving an answer, you're turning it into more questions. Okay. So the prospect, same situation. Why are you better? Why should I go with you? Hey, look, that's a great question. To answer that, I got to ask you a couple things about X. Okay. What are you looking for out of X? Now you flipped it on them. They're going to give you another answer. I'm looking for ABC. Got it. Why are those things important to you? Because we had issues with X before and we need Y to succeed and et cetera, right? And now you can phrase it. Okay, that makes sense. So if I understood you right, and you want to make sure you show clarity, it's very important. Most people aren't paying attention. If I understood you right, you're looking for a solution that helps you with this pain point because of this impact that it's having. Would it help you if I showed you how I solve that? Totally different perspective. You got them to relate to you. You got them to phrase the situation that they're in themselves. So you didn't phrase it for them. And now you're showing them exactly how you're going to get out of that ditch that they're in. right? And they're following you willingly versus being kind of reactive to whatever you're going to say. Because remember, you're a sales rep. You're the last person on earth anybody's going to believe, because you're not supposed to believe sales reps, right? That's just, it is what it is. The next thing is the risk reversal technique. And this is really, really similar, right? It's about flipping the script, right? So again, I'm a big believer that benefits don't matter. Benefits make you talk too much. How could you possibly know what's a benefit to me? In fact, you don't even know me, right? You've been talking to me for 3 minutes. You got to really better understand my operation. So, we've noticed that you typically want to stay away from benefits. And if you have a long feature list, like we sell PBX services, right? PBX has 175 features and benefits. How could I possibly, figure out what's important to you? And if I rattle out all 175, you're going to forget by the time I get to number 6. So instead, what you do is you try to flip it from benefits to risk, right? So let's assume that we're talking about like a backup solution that you might be offering as an MSP, right? And the customer is asking you about it, right? What you don't want to say is something like, yeah, our backup solution, it's great. It ensures you'll always have your files in case anything happens. It's always on. It's 24/7. It's gold plated. The president signed off on it, right? Like it's the best one in the world. I have 3 awards. You lost my attention, because that's what everybody's telling you, right? Instead, you want to say something consequential. You want to ask a consequence question. So for example, tell me about your backup solution, or what's better about it? Well, let me ask you something. What would happen if you all of a sudden lost your critical files? Well, you made me stop, right? I was waiting for you to give me an answer that I was already going to kind of be hesitant to, but now you made me start thinking about my consequence. So now I'm going to visualize my consequence. I'm going to say, oh man, if I lose my file, I'm not going to be compliant anymore. I kind of spooked myself. I'm realizing deep down inside, I need your solution. I'm a little bit more open-minded to what you have to say now. Right. And the why it works is, like I said here, right? And I've said it before, people are a little bit more motivated to move on pain, right, than they are to try to seek pleasure. The fear of loss is stronger than the excitement of gain. And again, instead of trying to sell the benefits and pushing the same 3 benefits that your competition is pushing. I mean, guys, trust me, we're all the best around. We all have the awards. We've all been doing this for 20 years. We all have a referral that will vouch for us, right? We all represent the best products. We're all giving the same benefits. Instead, you got to be that one person that just says, let's focus on the risk. What's the risk of you not doing it right? Not doing it right with me or anybody else, just you not doing it right, and help them from that perspective. And then the last thing on sales that I would say is, really start learning your natural closing style. I think a lot of people don't know how to close. And there is a lot of styles out there that you can coach yourself on, right? I got a couple here. You can Google them. You got the assumptive close, the soft close, the question close, the urgency close. I mean, literally Google these and you'll have no shortage of information that's going to help you. But it's understanding what's your style of closing, right? And having some repetition in what you do. And this is all about repetition. We want repetition in the services and the operations. We need it in our sales. We need repetition in how we prospect, repetition in how we message, repetition in how we close, so that we have the McDonald's model, right? There's a reason why McDonald's is successful. You can go into a McDonald's in any state and anywhere in this country, the burger tastes the same. Why? Because it's the same recipe, the same meat, the same process, the same machine to cook it on, etc. So we're bringing that McDonald's model into sales. Figure out what your style is and perfect that style. Now, me personally, if you haven't noticed the theme, I like to reverse things. I like to change it. I like to disarm people, just take the heat off of me. So my personal style is what I call the reversal close, right? That's just where I kind of flip the script and I do what I've been talking about before. So if someone, at the end of a phone call, without asking for the sale, without anybody, trying to insinuate anything's moving forward, I will tell you something like, hey, listen, I'd love to work together, right? And I'm not asking for the sale today, but I'd like to know, is there any reason why you wouldn't move forward with us? And that's it. That is my closing line. And it's not like the closing thing that I do to close. No, it's just naturally, I'm curious, right? At the end of our conversation, have I done my job? Have I shown you why I'm a good value? And what I've learned is ever since I started doing that, I started closing deals faster. I started having better relationships, and I was closing the right kind of customer, because right away they would tell me what's really on their mind, right? It wasn't the little surface stuff. It was what's really moving them. It was, I changed the onus from me proving myself to them kind of exposing what's important. And it allows me to focus on that. So instead of wrapping up with 3 random things or 5 features that I thought were important throughout the call that, my coaching says is probably what it is, I don't need to guess. This person's going to say, well, you know what? Yeah, this feature in the billing system, I'm not sure. Or this situation in your agreement, I'm not sure. And what I've also learned is that, remember, someone's truth is based on their perception. And a lot of times the thing they're not sure about, they're actually not accurate on, right? Because they have a perception or they have the wrong data. So that allows me to instantly fix it right there. And then when we hang up, the last thing that person is thinking about is how I identified the one problem that they have and how I'm fixing that problem. So hopefully when they talk to everybody else, they're rambling about their features. They can't remember anything except Albert's the guy who asked me, what's my problem? And he told me how he's going to fix it. And I'm the one that sticks out in their minds. All right, guys, we're going a little bit longer than I said we were going to go. So I'm going to keep going through these. But again, I'm a talker. So if you ask me to talk about this stuff, it's a lot of years, a lot of information here. So the last two pieces that we have are owning the customer relationship. It's going to be the first one.
Yeah, and before we get to those real quick, Albert, we had two kind of questions come in that I think are interesting. The first one, you've done the ABM prep and run the discovery process like you outlined. How important is it to like specifically script your interactions when reaching out for a sales call?
Horrible. I hate it.
Okay.
I absolutely hate it. Like, I'm not scripted for anything we're doing here today, but this is my own personal opinion, right? I have every nervous tick you can think of. So if you ask me to memorize a script and repeat that script, it would drive me nuts. And I see this as we're building our own sales team. So this is what I tell people. You don't need to memorize a script. You need to learn how to have conversation, right? Learn how to smile, learn how to ask questions, learn how to listen, take notes, and be confident, right? That's the most important thing. Like, there's just some people that ooze confidence, and it doesn't matter what they're selling. They're just, calm, cool, and collected on the call. And that's what's more important. So understand, especially with ABM, usually with ABM, you're focused on a niche, you're focused on a product. So understand that audience, understand that product, understand the high level moving parts, have an outline for how you want to run the conversation, but don't have a script because I think it's going to hurt you and your BDR reps.
All right, very good. The next question, how do you kind of deal with rejection? When someone gives you a hard not interested, does that always mean no to you?
I'm a crier. So if I got a rejection, I just cry a lot. So
a little sensitive.
Yeah. So look, a hard rejection is a hard rejection. A no is a no, right? Are there ways to try to explore your way out of the no? Yes, we've all done it. Got in that deal half an hour after the other deal was signed and got them to convince them. Sometimes that requires a little bit of magic on the person, right? Let's just be realistic here. But the goal is to not get there. The idea is if you're maintaining a good relationship, if you're having a healthy discovery, if you're having conversations where you're helping the customer and not closing the customer, then you're going to reduce the chances of that happening, right? And that's the goal. You want to be the person in their face. You want to be the person that they had the most trust with. You want to be the person that they compare everybody else to, and that's going to reduce that. So, once a deal is signed or they go somewhere else, you need the gift of the gag and magic.
All right. Now, as far as owning the customer relationship, now I was going through the slides before the event, Albert, and I noticed that owning the customer relationship, that seems to be an important theme for you. Why is this so important for providers, and how can it kind of help to transform their business outcomes in the long run?
Yeah. So look, owning the relationship, I think, is super important. From many different perspectives, right? Owning the relationship on paper, I think, is important, right? And that's just from value, right? And from keeping other people out. So when you own the customer on paper, you own the relationship on paper, you're going to see that the multiple on that revenue is going to be significantly different the day you go exit than if somebody else owns the customer. And it doesn't matter how great those reseller agreements are. This is just the way it is. But then at the same time, owning the relationship where you're the one that gets to touch it and hold it. Remember, MSPs and resellers, they're in a really unique business. They're in the business of selling technology. They're in the business of managing your technology, right? You can spin it any way you want. You're here to make them more productive through technology, more profitable through technology. But at the end of the day, you're managing their technology for a reason. So, the more that you can actually have insight to, the more you can control, the more you can configure, the more you can have access to quickly, the better you can serve that customer. So you want to be as least dependent on your vendors as possible. So yeah, for me, control is a very big deal, right? You unknowingly limit your growth. You're giving up control over pricing and margins in a lot of cases. So you can control your own profitability. With a lot of solutions out there, you're giving up control in quoting and installation, right? So it's lowering your sales cycle. It's not doing any benefits to your customer experience. It's affecting your support and service management, meaning, when there's an issue outside of your control, you have to call that call center in Atlanta where someone else is going to help you, and you can't just get into it yourself. The branding and billing, when it's not yours, it's someone else's. So that means every time the customer is logging in, every time they're paying an invoice, you're reinforcing someone else's brand, right? And then the customer relationship, you don't really own the customer, the provider does. So for me, when it comes to control, these are some of the things that I always have to have in any product that I bring into our organization. And, without pitching us yet, the same thing goes for our partners, right? We try to bring that same concept that if our partner can have this kind of control over these items, then it's not the kind of solution that they should be looking for. Now, when you look at ownership, and you want to think about, what is ownership and how does it affect your growth? Because that's why we're here. The risk of when you don't own the relationship, a bad customer experience, right? Your reputation's on the line. You said it a couple times. When there's a problem with the service, the customer doesn't say, oh man, AT&T's having this problem. No, they're going to say, oh man, Brady brought in AT&T and this problem's going on. Call Brady to figure out what's going on, right? So, not having access to it when you in reality are already kind of a front line to it is a bit of a problem. The limited flexibility and profitability like we discussed, right? You're handing customers to future competitors like we've kind of touched upon already, right? And the idea that you're building someone else's business on their terms instead of building your business on your terms. So when you're looking at a situation where you do have ownership of the items that we're talking about, you're talking about setting your own pricing and margins, right? So you have complete control of your profits. You can bundle it with some other service. You can increase it for some, decrease it for others. You can use it as a loss leader, a gateway, a moneymaker. The point is you are in control, right? You don't have to be dependent on a vendor approving it. You control the quoting and installations, right? So again, you're not waiting to get pricing approvals. You're not waiting for someone else to send it. You want to send a quote right now, Tuesday, 2:00, go ahead, send it, right? You want to activate it right now, go ahead, activate it. Access to better support. So not being dependent on your vendors for their services. Your own branding and billing, the ability to be able to invoice this yourself on your own terms. You want to give somebody net 30, net 15, net 60, pay same day, prepaid, postpaid, it doesn't matter. You should be able to choose, right? You should have that control. And no provider can really, give you that unless you're buying a very specific kind of product. So you essentially want to do it in a way where you complete the ownership so that the provider doesn't take these things from you. Because at the end of the day, you're not just selling services, you're selling a relationship. So you need control of these things to be able to manage that relationship.
No, very good. Now, regarding operational efficiency, operational inefficiencies, they do seem to be like a common challenge for a lot of people. What strategies should an MSP kind of implement to streamline quoting, onboarding, collections, customer support, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so, we're not going to talk today about PSAs and all the different integrations and RMMs. I mean, you guys have heard a lot of those conversations. Here, we're looking at operational efficiencies very specific to growth, right? So we're going to think quote to cash. How fast can you quote something and make sure that the services on the quote are not just typed in by somebody, but services that are coming from a billing system that are really connected to a platform that are going to automatically provision, that have all of their subscriptions mapped, all of their taxation mapped, their invoice settings mapped, right? That quote to cash process. So it's being able to get your orders out of WIP progress as fast as possible. So where does this even come from, right? So before I started this company, in my last sales job, my biggest frustration was getting my orders into build status because it didn't matter how much I sold. What only mattered was how much the company got into build status. And as a sales rep, for me, if it went into build status on the 29th or the 28th of the month, that was a significant difference on whether, than if it went into build status of the second or third of the next month, right? Because if it went into the second or third of the next month, I had to wait that entire extra sales cycle or commission cycle to get paid. So deep down in my bones, this has always been a frustration for me as a salesperson. I want to sell something now, and I want to put it into build status now, and I want to be able to take a payment now if I can. Well, in order for that to work, you got to be very automated. Your systems have to speak well together, right? You have to have good processes, good procedures, good configurations, etc. So, at the end of the day, what we've learned is that manual processes for MSPs, resellers, any kind of service provider, they slow everything down. And what happens is you do end up with what I call swivel chair operations. You have time wasted on repetitive manual tasks as you're swiveling around different apps. You have human errors in pricing, provisioning, billing. I hear stories about partners, spending 4 or 5 days a month reconciling, some even more. Some have full-time reconciling teams. I mean, that's just wild. You have slower response times, right, from your customers or for your customers. And then at the same time, you got revenue leaks, right? The revenue leaks are happening from delayed invoicing processes, delayed collection processes, etc. So the key to automation and system integrations is that they got to eliminate redundant work. They have to streamline processes, right? Because the more you automate and the more you streamline, the more you can grow without those very specific bottlenecks. And again, you're designing a process intended for scale. So if you say, okay, I only get 1 order a month, then you got to focus on getting more orders, right? You can't focus on scaling just yet. But if you can start creating an environment where every time you put in an order, it doesn't depend on you to actually deploy it, and you can get it deployed quickly, then those are the kind of processes you want to put in place. So like, what's the quote to cash growth formula the way we see it, right? A streamlined process means more revenue, less friction. So you're quoting in sales, you want to be able to enter data once and ensure that the services, the pricing, everything aligns with your platform and your systems, right? And that's just automatic. You want to be able to make sure you have automated provisioning. So after the customer accepts the quote, you don't want to have to log into multiple platforms, provision those services, attach subscriptions, configure them. You want to have a system or integrations that take you throughout that entire process. You want to have billing and invoicing, set up already so that it's automated. Again, I hear about people deploying services and forgetting to put subscriptions, or deleting a service, forgetting to delete the subscription because the platform and the billing system are not tied together. You want to make sure that that's not happening, that you're applying things on time automatically, that you're taxing them correctly, that you're invoicing them correctly. You want to have automated collections, right? You don't want to make sure that you have to go to your customers and process payments, or they say you suspend somebody, but the customer paid you on a Friday at 8 o'clock at night, have to stop and reinstate them. That's wild. You want to make sure that you have automated reinstatement and suspension across your services. So if they don't pay, it suspends them. If they do pay, it reinstates them, and you never had anything to do with it. And you want to make sure you have access to integrated support tools, right? I mean, that's super, super important. If at the end of the day you can't support your customer quickly, then a lot of these things are kind of a moot point. They all kind of go together. With that, I will share a little bit about RingLogix, and where we come. So again, a lot of what we, shared today is our learnings throughout the last 5 years that we've been building this organization, right? Very fortunate to build it through a 8-figure revenue and through. And then, at the same time, it's not just what we've learned and what we see, but what we incorporate for our partners' products. So yes, RingLogix, we are the developers of an application called RingOS. It is a fully automated quote-to-cash solution that is branded and multi-tenant for communication services. It is a white label VoIP platform. It includes all types of services from UCaaS, hosted PBX, call center, SIP trunking, webfax, CPaaS, you name it, it's got it. And the big thing about the platform is that it does align with everything we discussed today, right? Although outside of the sales strategies that we try to coach on, right? You control the pricing, you control the margins, the quoting is built in and fully integrated. It's completely branded. The activations are all automatic, real time. You never have to talk to your account manager. You never have to talk to your sales rep. You want to deploy a system Sunday 3 a.m., just click a button, it's there. You got built-in billing and dunning, built-in payment processing, troubleshooting. It is a true multi-tenant solution. So you are looking at customers, managing around. And at the end of the day, you own the customer. You own the customer, you own the experience, you own the paper, you own the branding, you own everything. We are your partner in the background, and you are the provider to your customer. It's an alternative to your traditional agent programs. And, really what we do is we help partners that are getting, $2,000, $3,000 in commission from these agent programs. And we help them turn that into, $12,000, $15,000 plus in profit margins, not to mention the revenue that they get to realize because of it.
Well, very well thought out, Albert, for sure. Definitely laid out, I think, in a way that a lot of people can understand and get a lot of value from this. We did have one question kind of come in before we wrap things up. If you could kind of leave us with one actionable step to boost growth and efficiency in business, what would that be? And how can we kind of learn more about partnering with RingLogix to maybe help achieve some of these goals?
So funny enough, that's my last statement on my last slide, right? So if I left you with one thing, I've heard this a lot, right? I've been to other events like Around the Rock and a few others, and you hear people walking away saying, well, that's so obvious. And what I'll tell you is, look, even obvious things don't work if they're not done properly at all, right? So a lot of what I talked about yesterday, it's obvious. Yes, you can Google it, and yeah, you can ask ChatGPT and be a master in a day. But if you don't sit down execute, measure, rinse, repeat, then you're never going to see the results, right? So you can continue, dredging the ocean, waiting for a referral, doing your unstructured advertising ads and see where that takes you. Or you can get very intentional, start building an intentional pipeline and possibly double, triple, quadruple the business that you have today. So really, pick a spot and start small, because the next thing is, it's always better to start small and let those small failures teach you how to go big. Start small, because, I've learned this the hard way, guys. I've blown a lot of money doing it. You learn something, you get super excited, you think you've mastered it, you throw a ton of money, a ton of resources, and it completely flops, right? So what I've learned is it's always easier to start small and complicate things later. It's much difficult to start big and scale it down. So start small, learning what you're doing, get your sea legs under you. And once you've figured out how to turn that black box of marketing activity into a drip of sales faith, and you actually turn it into a predictable machine, then it's a matter of just opening the levers in the right places and letting your business scale.
You got to crawl before you walk, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Albert, thank you so much for the time today.
No, Brady, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And guys, I hope you got a chance to learn something. If you have any more information, please reach out to sales@ringlogix.com. You could also reach out to me, Albert at RingLogix, so you can check us out on LinkedIn. If you want to follow, if you want to learn a little bit about what we offer, we're happy to talk to you. If you just want to, talk about what we talked about here today, go ahead, reach out. We're happy to talk about this as well. Not masters in it, but happy to share what we've learned.
Of course, yeah, no, great thought leadership coming from RingLogix. Now, before we go, just a couple quick hits. I want to let everyone know that by attending this webinar, you're automatically enrolled in the Channel Vision Webinar Rewards Program. You may have won one of our monthly drawings. For information on the program and to see what kind of prizes you may have won, visit our website, channelvisionmag.com/webinar-rewards. And remember, you can access this webinar as well as all other Channel Vision presentations on demand by visiting channelvisionmag.com, our website. Also a reminder, real quick, that CVX Expo 25 returns now for the fourth year, November 3rd through 5th in a new location. We've signed a new 3-year agreement with the Marriott Renaissance Hotel and Spa in Glendale, Arizona. Very exciting stuff. CVX Expo attendees and exhibitors include independent agents and TSDs, MSPs, resellers, and IT solution providers, trusted advisors and consultants, wholesale communications providers, cloud solution providers, business IT and security providers, business partner enablement service providers. For more information, visit cvxexpo.com. And from all of us, Channel Vision Magazine, and our good friends at RingLogix, everybody, thanks for attending. Be good to one another. Bye-bye.